I found them in my kitchen, holding hands like thieves. Gavin smiled, and Mara's eyes begged me not to speak. He said, "It happened, like weather, not a wrecked life." I whispered, "You took everything," and he didn't deny it. Right then, I promised they'd remember my name without mercy. The kettle clicked off, hissing, as if it understood betrayal. He stepped between us like a judge, calm and careful. Mara shook but still didn't let go of him today. I set my keys down, choosing steadiness over broken shouting. "Leave my house tonight," I said, voice flat from shock. Gavin nodded like we were negotiating a cable bill, not lives. He packed a bag already waiting, hidden behind the pantry door. Mara whispered my name, soft as dust under moving furniture. I kept counting breaths because numbers don't argue or lie. He said, "You'll understand someday. The line cowards always choose." I stared at his shoes, mud from our mother's yard. He'd helped me bury her, then stole what she loved. My jaw ached, but my hands stayed at my sides. "Go," I said again, because repeating hurt less than pleading. They left through the back, stepping over the cracked threshold. Neighbors watched from windows, silhouettes pretending not to be curious. I sat on the porch until the porch forgave me. Our street smelled like rain, gasoline, and a life miscounted. My phone buzzed from friends, asking if rumors were true. I typed nothing, because silence felt safer than explanations tonight. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked like a witness refusing testimony. I boxed her letters and the photos we never printed. I left his shirt folded on the chair he favored. Then I wrote a note and taped it inside cabinets. "I'm done being smallest," it said, steady and unflinching here. I packed a duffel with clothes, tools, and the deed. The deed meant nothing now, only paper that remembered promises. I locked the door and slid the key under mat. The night air cooled my face and steadied my stomach. I drove until the highway lights thinned into quiet dark. At a motel, the clerk didn't ask for stories tonight. I paid cash and carried shame like luggage nobody checks. In the room, the bedspread smelled like bleach and cigarettes. I showered until the mirror fogged and erased my face. Before sleeping, I wrote 3 words on the notepad. Begin. Morning came with weak coffee and a parking lot of strangers. I called my foreman and resigned without giving new details. He grunted, said nothing kind, and hung up quickly anyway. I turned off my phone and opened the motel directory. There was a thrift store hiring part-time cash on Fridays. I said yes because pride doesn't beat empty cabinets long. I would mop floors, lift boxes, and not answer gossip. Every hour would stack into something heavier than heartbreak eventually. I promised the mirror I'd earn a name without them. That was my first step away and toward myself again. Rock bottom didn't happen all at once. It arrived quietly, like debt letters piling up in a drawer. I rented a 1-room basement with walls that smelled of damp carpet and regret. The light flickered when the heater came on, and some nights it didn't. I lived on instant noodles, black coffee, and silence. People at work barely looked at me. I didn't blame them. Every sound reminded me of laughter that wasn't mine anymore. I avoided mirrors because they showed a man who trusted too easily. Bills kept coming, and my pride kept shrinking. Every night, I told myself, just one more day. But mornings kept coming, asking for more strength than I had. I tried calling Mara once, late one night when loneliness felt like drowning. She didn't answer, and that silence was worse than any words. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, reflecting my face like a ghost. Gavin's name sat there too, still saved as brother. I wanted to delete it, but couldn't. Not yet. I threw the phone across the room and watched it slide under the bed. The next morning, I found it cracked, buzzing faintly with a low battery. It felt like a metaphor I didn't need explained. I turned it off, packed it away, and stopped expecting closure. From that day, I spoke to no one except cashiers and bus drivers. The world moved, and I just stood still. The job at the thrift store barely paid for rent, but it gave me hours to think. My hands sorted clothes donated by people who'd moved on with their lives. I folded jackets like apologies and priced shoes with precision that didn't matter. The store manager, Mr. Blake, noticed how quiet I was. One day he said, "You work like someone trying to erase something." I didn't answer, but he smiled like he already knew. Later he told me, "Erasing doesn't work. You build over it instead." I didn't understand then, but those words stuck like nails in wet wood. I started staying late, cleaning shelves after closing, just to avoid the silence waiting at home. A few weeks later, Mr. Blake asked if I could fix an old radio someone donated. I took it apart on the counter and worked on it till dawn. When it finally crackled back to life, something small but real shifted inside me. I hadn't felt capable of fixing anything for months. Not machines, not people, not myself. But that sound, faint and alive, felt like a heartbeat returning. Mr. Blake patted my shoulder and said, "You've got good hands, son. Don't waste them on grief." That night, I walked home under street lights that looked a little brighter. I didn't know it yet, but that small repair had fixed more than just a radio. It had repaired a part of me. Still, healing didn't come fast. Some mornings, I'd wake up gasping from dreams where they were still together, laughing at me. I'd sit by the window until sunrise, whispering, "You're still here," just to prove it. The ache didn't leave, but it changed shape. Less sharp, more familiar. Mess. Blake became the closest thing I had to a mentor. "Pain's like rust," he said one evening. "Ignore it and it eats through everything. Face it and you can sand it off." I smiled for the first time in months. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. For the first time since losing everything, I wanted to live better, not bitter. The first step didn't feel like progress. It felt like survival with purpose. Mr. Blake noticed I stayed late after shift, tinkering with broken radios and clocks the store couldn't sell. "If you keep fixing things that don't pay, you'll be broke twice," he said once, half smiling. I shrugged. "Guess I'm practicing." He studied me for a moment. "Then practice on something that matters." The next day, he handed me a rusted toolbox and a small sign that read, "Repairs done here. Cheap, honest, fast." I hung it by the window without thinking twice. That was how it began, quietly, without applause or ambition. Just a man trying to matter again. At first, business was almost nothing. A few people brought in fans, a toaster, and one broken typewriter. I fixed them all, charging barely enough for coffee. But every time something clicked back to life under my hands, I felt steadier. Mr. Blake would walk by and say, "See, you're building something." I didn't believe him yet, but his words stuck. I kept saving whatever I earned, no matter how small. Each night, I'd count the coins on my kitchen table like prayers. That ritual gave my days a rhythm, a reason to keep showing up. Slowly, I started recognizing my reflection again. Not proud, but patient. A few months later, a woman named Donna started coming into the shop. She worked nearby and always brought broken things that didn't look worth saving. A cracked lamp, an old sewing machine, once even a music box missing half its gears. "You sure you want this fixed?" I'd ask. She'd smile softly. Not everything broken's worthless. Something about her words hit deeper than she knew. We started talking more, usually while I worked and she watched. She never asked about my past, and I never volunteered it. But her silence felt kind, not cold. She reminded me what decent company sounded like. Mr. Blake eventually let me handle small purchase orders and storage. "You've got an eye for what lasts," he said. I realized that was true. I could spot things that still had life left in them. It became a skill, almost a calling. I started going to flea markets on weekends, buying broken appliances for cheap and fixing them at night. My apartment filled with the hum of repaired things, radios, clocks, mixers, like a choir of second chances. For the first time since Gavin's betrayal, I didn't feel hollow when I woke up. Work had filled the cracks where anger used to live. One evening, Dana stayed late while I fixed her music box. When it finally played again, she smiled and said, "You look lighter when you fix things." I laughed quietly. "Guess that's the only time I know who I am." She looked at me like she wanted to say more, but didn't. I wound the box again, watching the gears spin like tiny acts of forgiveness. "You can keep it," she said. "It suits you better." I tried to refuse, but she insisted. That night, I placed it on my windowsill, the faint melody softening the walls that once held only silence. Then, one afternoon, a man in a blue jumpsuit came by. "You the one who fixed that old toaster for Mrs. Heller?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "She won't stop talking about it," he said, grinning. "I've got an old heater in my garage if you're interested. Pays better than toasters." I followed him after work, repaired the heater, and got paid double my usual rate. That's when I realized fixing things wasn't just therapy, it was opportunity. I bought better tools, built a small workbench, and put up a second sign outside the store. "Repairs by Alex Hale, reliable work." It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Word spread faster than I expected. People from nearby neighborhoods came with their broken fans, coffee makers, and washing machines. Some stayed to talk, others just nodded with gratitude. Each customer felt like a small redemption, another nail sealing the coffin on who I used to be. Mr. Blake eventually said, "You don't work for me anymore, Alex. You work with me." That was the first time anyone had said my name with pride in years. I went home that night, sat beside the music box, and whispered, "You're getting there." The melody played softly, and for once I believed it. Growth didn't happen like a miracle. It came one repair, one late night, one decision at a time. My shop corner inside the thrift store turned into something people started trusting. They'd walk in asking, "Where's the repair guy?" And I'd look up from my workbench, hands covered in oil, and say, "Right here." Mr. Blake gave me full space in the back, saying, "You earned your own walls." I painted them light blue, the color of fresh starts. Every tool had its place, every shelf labeled and neat. The rhythm of fixing things made days blur into quiet success. I started taking orders through word of mouth, sometimes 5 or 6 jobs a week. The more I worked, the less I thought about Gavin and Mara. Their memory faded like an old bruise, visible, but no longer painful. One rainy morning, Dana brought me a newspaper folded neatly. "You should read page 5, she said. I opened it and saw my name printed in small letters under "Local Tradesman Revives the Art of Repair." A journalist had written about how small businesses like mine were bringing old craftsmanship back. My photos showed me smiling without realizing it. "You're officially famous," Dana teased. I laughed, shaking my head. That word doesn't fit me. Still, I kept the paper, folded clean inside a drawer. It wasn't pride I felt. It was something quieter, closer to dignity, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to exist. Customers started lining up earlier each week. Some came for repairs. Others came just to talk. One man said, "You remind me of my dad. He fixed everything before buying new." I smiled, realizing that maybe that was the point. Fixing was my language for love. Mr. Blake noticed the growing crowd and said, "You're outgrowing this place." The words scared me more than excited me. He handed me a small envelope one evening, his handwriting shaky on the front. "Advance for your own space." I refused at first, but he insisted. "You'll pay it back when you can," he said. "People need more of what you do." That night, I barely slept. The thought of starting over again, both thrilling and terrifying. A month later, I signed the lease for a small shop 2 blocks away. The windows were cracked, the floor uneven, but it was mine. I worked every night, cleaning, painting, and moving tools by hand. Dana helped hang the new sign, "Hail Repairs, honest work, fair hands." When I flipped the lights on for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace that came from creation, not revenge. The opening day wasn't grand, but people came. Mr. Blake, Dana, even a few customers from the old store. They shook my hand, brought snacks, and said they'd spread the word. I stood there watching them and thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. As weeks turned into months, I hired one helper, a quiet young man named Luis, who reminded me of myself years ago. He worked hard, rarely complained, and asked questions that made me proud. "How do you stay patient when things don't fit right?" he once asked. I smiled. "Everything fits eventually, just not the way you expect." We worked side by side every day, music playing from the same old radio I'd fixed at Mr. Blake's store. Each repaired item left the shop like a story rewritten, the kind with better endings than beginnings. Then one afternoon, a woman came in with a broken lamp. I didn't recognize her until she spoke. "It's been a long time, Alec." My hands froze. It was Mara. Her voice was softer, her eyes tired. She looked smaller somehow, like someone who'd been running from herself too long. "I saw the sign," she said, holding out the lamp. "Didn't know if you'd remember me." "I remember," I said quietly, setting the lamp on the counter. "What do you need fixed?" She hesitated. "Everything," she whispered. For a moment, the past pressed against the walls like smoke. I nodded once and got to work. We didn't talk much while I worked, just the sound of glass and metal filling the space. She finally said, "Gavin's not doing well." I didn't look up. "People get what they chase," I said. She nodded, tears welling. "You don't hate me?" "I did," I admitted. "But hate's heavy. I had to drop it to move forward." She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded photograph, and placed it on the table. Us, years ago, smiling under summer light. "I kept it," she said. I handed it back. "You should let it go." She looked at me, searching for anger but finding none. "You changed," she said softly. "That was the point," I replied. When she left, I stood there for a long time, staring at the doorway. Luis asked, "Old friend?" "Something like that," I said. I turned off the lamp, packed up my tools, and realized the wound had finally closed. I didn't need closure anymore. I'd built one. The turning point came on a morning that didn't look special at all. The sky was gray, traffic thick, and the coffee too bitter. Luis was late, and I was fixing an air compressor when the bell above the door rang. A man in a tailored coat stepped in, scanning the room like he already owned it. "You're Mr. Hale?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "What's the problem?" He smiled. "Opportunity. My name's Carter. I handle contracts for CityWorks Construction. We're opening a new site nearby and need a full-time equipment maintenance partner." I froze, unsure if I'd heard him right. He looked around the shop. You've got a reputation for good hands and honest billing. That's rare. I wiped my palms on a rag. What made you come here? Mr. Blake, he said simply. Said you don't cut corners. I laughed quietly. No, sir. I learned the hard way where corners lead. We signed the contract a week later. It wasn't huge money, but it was stability. Steady work, invoices paid on time, no more worrying about next month's rent. I hired 2 new helpers, bought better tools, and upgraded the shop lighting. Every night, when the last machine stopped humming, I'd sit on the stool and stare at the quiet room. It felt earned. Not given, not taken, earned. Dana came by one evening to drop off dinner. You finally look happy, she said. Not proud, I asked. That too, she smiled, but mostly happy. I nodded. Guess it took losing everything to figure out what I actually wanted. She squeezed my shoulder. Then don't lose yourself again. Months passed like minutes. We expanded into 2 rooms, then 3. Luis handled calls, I managed repairs, and customers became regulars. People started calling me Mr. Hale with respect that didn't need explanation. One afternoon, I found myself laughing with a client about a broken drill, and it hit me how long it had been since laughter felt natural. The bitterness had left so quietly, I hadn't noticed it go. That night, I locked up and wrote a note under my ledger. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from no longer fighting. I taped it to the wall above the counter. Every morning after, I read it before starting work. Then, out of nowhere, the past called again. Literally, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number, and when I answered, silence filled the line. Then a voice I knew better than my own said, Alex. I froze. It's Gavin. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I heard about your shop. Congratulations. His voice sounded older, heavier. What do you want? I asked flatly. Nothing, he said. I just wanted to hear if you'd hang up. I didn't. How's business? I asked dryly. He sighed. Gone. Investors pulled out. I made some bad calls. I said nothing. He added, and Mara, she left, said she couldn't live with what we did. His words landed like pebbles, not bombs. I'd expected worse. I'm sorry, he said finally. For everything. I said quietly, you took what I loved, but not what I was. You never could. Then I ended the call. The next day, I told no one about it. I poured my focus into work, fixing machines with more calm than ever. But something about his voice stayed with me. Not anger, not pity, just recognition. He was still chasing shortcuts. I'd learned to walk the long road. 2 weeks later, Carter called to say the company was renewing our contract for the next year. You're officially part of the big circle now, he said. I laughed. I'm fine being the quiet guy in the corner. When the check arrived, I framed the first invoice and hung it near the front desk, not as a trophy, but as proof that slow, honest work beats clever betrayal every time. That night, Donna and Luis insisted we celebrate. We closed early, brought food, and filled the shop with music and laughter. At one point, I looked around and realized how full the room was. Tools, people, stories, warmth. I raised a glass and said, to old mistakes, may they never feel wasted. Everyone laughed, but I meant it, because every scar, every betrayal, had led here. Later, when I locked up alone, I whispered, you see this, Gavin? This is what surviving looks like. The silence didn't answer, but I didn't need it to. The echo in that quiet room already felt like peace. The reunion happened one Friday evening when the shop smelled of warm metal and coffee. I was closing early, paperwork half finished, when Luis called from the front. Someone here to see you? I stepped out and froze. Gavin stood by the door, hands in his pockets, eyes tired, clothes too big for his frame. He smiled weakly. Didn't think you'd recognize me. I didn't answer right away. The years had stripped away his arrogance, but guilt still clung to him like a second skin. What do you want? I asked finally. To talk, he said quietly. I looked at the clock. I'm closing soon. He nodded. Then I'll be quick. We sat on the same wooden bench customers used while waiting for repairs. He looked around, taking in the walls, the tools, the hum of machines still cooling down. You did well for yourself, he said. Better than I did, anyway. His voice cracked halfway through. I heard about your business, the contracts, the reputation. I kept telling myself it should have been me. I didn't speak. He went on. Turns out, envy doesn't build much of a life. He rubbed his hands together like he could warm them on regret. I watched him struggle with words that once came too easily. I didn't come for forgiveness, he said. I came because I don't know who I am anymore. Before I could respond, the door opened again. Mara walked in, hesitating like someone entering a church. She looked thinner, older, eyes carrying too many apologies. I told him not to come, she said softly. He didn't listen. Gavin gave a sad laugh. Never did. I stood, keeping my voice calm. You both chose your path. I just built mine. Mara stepped closer. I thought love would make me safe. It didn't. I just lost 2 men instead of 1. Her words trembled, but they were honest. You still hate me? She asked. No, I said. You can't hate someone forever and stay human. Gavin looked up sharply. You really don't? No, I said again, but I don't owe you peace either. The three of us stood in silence for a long moment. Outside, rain started tapping against the windows, small and steady. Gavin looked around again, eyes wet. You built something real, he whispered. I built lies. He wiped his face and laughed bitterly. I guess we both got what we earned. Maybe, I said, but one of us stopped digging. Mara looked at me like she wanted to say something else, but the words never came. She reached out, then pulled her hand back. I hope you're happy, she said finally. I nodded. I am. They both looked surprised, as if they didn't expect the answer to be true. Before they left, Gavin turned to me and said, You know, I used to think success would make me untouchable. Now I think forgiveness would have saved me instead. I met his eyes. Forgiveness isn't a key, Gavin. It's a door you stop knocking on. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts more than tears. You always had the better words, he said. No, I replied. I just stopped lying to myself. Mara squeezed his arm gently, and together they walked out into the rain. I watched them go until the sound of their footsteps faded. Luis came in a few minutes later, holding 2 cups of coffee. Friends of yours? He asked. Once, I said. Now they're just part of the story. He nodded like he understood and handed me a cup. You okay? Yeah, I said. Better than I expected. I sat on the same bench they had just left, still warm from where Gavin had been sitting. The coffee tasted bitter, but clean, like something old, finally finished. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the streets the way time washes pain. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man with something to prove. I felt like someone who'd already won quietly. When I locked the door that night, I saw their reflections faintly in the glass, 2 ghosts passing through the edges of my new life. I didn't reach out or wave. Some goodbyes work best in silence. Guilt came slowly for him, like a debt that refused to disappear. A few days after the reunion, I found an envelope slipped under the shop door. My name was written on it in shaky pen strokes. Inside was a short letter from Gavin. I can't sleep. Every sound reminds me of what I took from you. I thought I was winning, but I've only been running from the man I became. I don't want money or pity. I just need you to know I see it now. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and placed it beside Dad's old wrench on the shelf. The anger that should have risen didn't. All I felt was a strange kind of stillness. 2 days later, Gavin showed up again. No coat, no pride, just a man worn down by his own choices. I don't expect you to let me in, he said quietly. I just needed to say it to your face. I nodded, keeping my hand steady. Then say it. He took a long breath. I ruined everything because I wanted to be first at something. You built peace while I chased noise. I thought stealing from you would make me strong, but it just made me smaller. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched until it stopped feeling cruel. You were my brother, I said softly. I would have given you everything if you'd just asked. His eyes filled, and he whispered, I know. We stood there without moving, years of bitterness collapsing into quiet understanding. Finally, he said, Do you ever think about starting over? I shook my head. Starting over means erasing the lesson. I'd rather remember. He nodded slowly, like the words hurt but made sense. You forgive me? He asked. I thought for a long time before answering. Forgiveness isn't something I give, I said. It's something you earn by living differently. He exhaled, nodding again. Then I'll try. He turned to leave, then stopped. You ever miss her? Sometimes, I said, but not the way you think. What I loved in her was what I lost in myself. I got it back. That seemed to break something in him. His shoulders sagged, but his face softened. He came back once more a week later, not to talk, but to work. Let me help, he said. Pay me or don't. I just need something to do. Against my better judgment, I handed him a rag and pointed at the old lawnmowers waiting to be cleaned. He worked silently for hours, and for the first time since we were boys, we moved in sync again, tools passing between us. No words, no resentment. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close. When he left that evening, he looked at me and said, Feels good to earn sweat again. I smiled faintly. Keep showing up, and maybe it'll feel better. Mara came by a few days later, holding a small plant in a clay pot. It's from Gavin, she said. He said you don't like gifts, so I brought it. I placed it by the window where the sun hit in the afternoon. How is he? I asked. Different, she said quietly. He stopped drinking, started working at a garage outside town. She hesitated. He said he doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but he's trying to deserve his own. That line stayed with me long after she left. Maybe we were all trying to earn peace in our own ways. Hers came in honesty, his in effort, mine in letting go. A month later, I got another letter from Gavin. No apology this time, just a note. I fixed the old truck, runs smoother now. Feels good to do things right for once. At the bottom, he'd written, I hope you're proud of the man I'm becoming. I finally am. I folded the letter and smiled. Maybe he finally understood that redemption isn't a moment, it's maintenance, like tightening loose bolts before the whole thing falls apart. I went outside, watered the plant by the window, and whispered, "Keep growing, brother." That night, I sat by the workbench, staring at the tools that built my second life. I realized guilt had stopped being a chain. It had turned into a bridge between who we were and who we became. I didn't forgive Gavin in one sentence. I forgave him in the silence that followed. He didn't ask again, and I didn't need to answer. We had both learned that real justice isn't punishment, it's understanding. The years that followed felt softer, like the world had finally exhaled. The shop ran smoothly. Customers came and went, and every evening the place glowed warm from the inside out. Luis handled most of the new orders now, his confidence steady and sure. Donna took care of invoices and kept the books organized in a way I never could. I had people who cared, work that mattered, and peace that didn't depend on anyone's approval. Sometimes I'd stand outside the shop before closing, listening to the faint hum of machines inside and the city sounds fading into night. It felt like the world was finally quiet enough for gratitude to speak. I still saw Gavin every now and then. He worked at a small garage outside of town, just like he said he would. He never came empty-handed, always brought spare parts or an old wrench or something he thought I could use. We didn't talk about the past anymore. It wasn't because we were avoiding it. It just didn't belong in our conversations anymore. Once, when I thanked him for a set of new pliers, he said, "It feels good to give back for a change." I nodded. "Then keep giving, not because you owe it, but because it helps you breathe." He smiled, and I saw in his eyes the man he was supposed to become years ago. Mara never returned after the plant, but sometimes I thought of her too. Not with bitterness, not even regret, just quiet acknowledgement. She'd been a chapter that hurt to read, but helped me grow. Without her, without Gavin's betrayal, I might have never learned how deep I could rebuild. Every scar had purpose, every loss had built muscle. When the ache occasionally resurfaced, it wasn't pain, it was a reminder that healing had roots. The plant she brought still sat by the window, taller now, its leaves turning toward the light every morning. I watered it once a week, a ritual of remembrance and forgiveness. One afternoon, Luis came running in, holding a letter. "It's from the mayor's office," he said. I opened it, half expecting a bill, but it was an invitation to an award ceremony for local businesses contributing to community welfare. "You've been chosen," he grinned. "You'll be up there with the big names now." I laughed softly. Big names fix engines. I fix the people who own them. But I went anyway. The ceremony was simple. Handshakes, photographs, applause. Standing on that stage, I thought of every night I'd eaten instant noodles alone, every silence I'd endured, every piece of metal I'd turned into meaning. I didn't feel proud. I felt grateful. After the ceremony, as I walked back to my truck, I saw a familiar figure leaning against the fence. Gavin. He looked healthier, clearer, even hopeful. "Heard about the award," he said. "Couldn't miss it." I smiled. "You didn't have to come." "Yeah," he said, "but I wanted to." We stood there in the cool evening air, saying nothing for a while. Then he said, "You know, I thought forgiveness was about someone letting you off the hook. Turns out, it's about learning to live with the weight." I nodded slowly, and he smiled faintly. "I think I'm finally strong enough to carry it." I clapped his shoulder once, firm and simple. "Then we both made it," I said. He drove off, and I stayed by the fence for a while, watching taillights fade into the distance. The night smelled of oil, rain, and second chances. I thought of Dad, of how he used to say, "A man's worth isn't in what he owns, it's in what he repairs." He was right. I hadn't just repaired machines. I'd repaired my name, my dignity, my peace. When I walked back into the shop that night, the plant by the window rustled softly under the breeze, as if approving. I turned off the lights, let the silence settle, and realized I'd finally outgrown the pain that once defined me. I locked up, stood under the flickering streetlight, and looked at the sign above the door. "Hale Repairs. Honest work, fair hands." My name didn't hurt anymore. It healed. I took a deep breath and smiled at the night sky, thinking of the boy who once lost everything. He'd made it here, quietly, without fanfare, without revenge, just dignity, earned inch by inch. If this story found you tonight, take a moment before you go. Tell me, if someone betrays your trust but breaks themselves in the process, would you open the door again or leave it closed and keep your peace?